Game week. Game week. We made it. 7.5 months of waiting, but USC begins its 2025 college football season this Saturday, this weekend, game week. Matt Zemek with Ethan Inman here at the Voice of College Football. Support the USC channel. And a reminder, well, we're here on a Tuesday, so Tuesdays going forward, we're going to be here 7 p.m. Pacific in Los Angeles, 10 p.m. in the East. That's going to be our home during the regular season. We obviously don't want to be on Thursday nights because there's football on Thursday nights. We don't want to compete with football. That's what you waited 7.5 months to watch. So we're going to do this thing on Tuesdays. And during the season, post-game coverage for every USC game. It's not right after the game on Saturday. We're doing our Sunday evening day after show. That's going to come at you regularly at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. in the East. We're going to be there Sunday evenings, late afternoons in the West, every Sunday for the next 3 months, wrapping up USC football on Saturday. So Ethan and I giving you the extended coverage that you want, that you crave, that you deserve here on the USC channel at the Voice of College Football. All right, Ethan. So it's game week, and so obviously there's the Missouri State and just, handling a first game and all those things, but we have layers of news to start out with. You can pick where you want to start, but there's a big batch of stories that demand attention. Why don't you just start us off with what you think is the number one story going into Missouri State?
Sure. I think the big news of the day is that Killian O'Connor is going to be starting at center. Obviously, USC has kind of had a battle all offseason between him and John Ray Reed, who's a transfer. So that we finally have some clarity on that. It's going to be Killian O'Connor. Thought this was a pretty cool quote from him here because he obviously came into USC as a walk-on. And so he says in response to if he ever envisioned this day, he didn't come to be a bag holder. So, very confident, obviously, very kind of quote with a lot of swagger there, I suppose. But no, I mean, I'm happy for him. He's a guy who they've developed for multiple years. He obviously came in as a walk-on and is now getting a chance to start in a Division I game at USC at a school that has so much history. So big congrats to him, obviously. But another interesting note that I've seen about this whole story is that, despite them finally naming a starting center, they're planning to play both Killian O'Connor and John Ray Reed. And I would imagine that's going to extend through at least the first 3 games as they kind of try to figure out who the starting center is, more definitively going forward for some of these more important conference games. So kind of interesting. Center is a very key position. Offensive line, you don't tend to see a lot of this, platooning where, unless there's injuries, you don't tend to see multiple guys kind of battling it out within the first few games. So interesting to see there. I did see that Lincoln Riley said that Killian O'Connor has been more consistent, and obviously consistency is huge. So them picking him because of his consistency seems like a wise choice. But, something to continue to monitor and a really interesting storyline for USC fans to watch in these first couple games. As we assume and hope that USC is going to be up big, you kind of want to be watching some of these, more nuanced position battles. So Killian O'Connor and John Ray Reed is definitely one to watch here in these first couple weeks.
I think the question every USC football fan has, and it's the question I'm going to ask of you because we want to address it here at the Voice of College Football. How do you think the rotation between O'Connor and Reed should be handled? And let's be clear. We're not saying, yes, they should be juggling, rotating at center, or no, they shouldn't. We're just addressing the point of, given that the coaches have decided, at least at this point, to have a rotation, how should that rotation go? To me, Ethan, and obviously, I'm going to let you offer your answer. You don't want to kind of yank this thing back and forth violently. You don't want to do it drive by drive, I would think. I would say you give Killian O'Connor the first half. And then at halftime, you see where you are. And I think it would probably make sense to have Reed come in at the start of the second half. Now, of course, if the game's a little closer than you are expecting, maybe that adjusts the plan. But I would say going in, you let Jaden Maiava, you let all these guys run with Killian O'Connor for a full half. And then at halftime, you can coach up Reed and you have him start the third quarter. And then maybe in the fourth quarter, you see where you are, can kind of go from there. And, if USC does put this game to bed relatively early, as it should, Trojans are favored by 35.5 points, in case you're interested. And we will do Big Ten picks later in the show. Then you basically get O'Connor for one half and Reed for one half, which, if you're rotating players and if you want to be sure, who's number one, that would seem to be really in this first cupcake game how you should do it. What's the point of having a rotation? Again, I'm not judging the rotation. I'm not saying this is great. I'm not saying this is horrible. Just if you're going to bother to say that you're having a rotation, and if that is your plan, then it seems to me you give the one, the first half, the two, the second half, so that you get 30 minutes of film on each guy. All right, Ethan, your take. How do you think Lincoln Riley and Zach Hansen should handle this rotation at center?
I agree that drive by drive is a bad idea. I think, though, I might push back just a little on the one half versus one half model, because I think that the quarterback that each center is working with matters. And I think that I would like to see both of them, because assumedly, if this game goes as everyone assumes it's going to go, we're not going to see Jaden Maiava play all four quarters. We're hopefully going to have Husan Longstreet or Sam Hewitt or whoever in there in the fourth quarter. So, presumably Husan Longstreet, unless they decide to get creative with the red shirt like we talked about a couple weeks ago. But I think because of that, I would want to see both centers work with both quarterbacks. And so in my mind, the thing that makes the most sense is you have Killian O'Connor play the first quarter, you have Jean-Ray Reed play the second quarter, and then you have Killian O'Connor back for the third quarter, and then you have Jean-Ray Reed back for the fourth quarter. Just because I think that gives them both the opportunity to work with Maiava in game. It gives them both the opportunity to work with the younger quarterback in Husan Longstreet in game. And it just gives you, kind of that diversity of film, how they work with different quarterbacks. Chemistry obviously matters, and that's something that you need to evaluate when it comes to, these more important Big Ten games. And so I just think that makes the most sense to me. I'd like to see them switch out and both get to work with both quarterbacks. But that also does it in a way where you're not like, Killian O'Connor, finally is getting in a groove. He's had one drive to get his feet wet, and then we're yanking him out for Jean-Ray Reed or, mid-drive or anything else crazy like that. So I think if you're going to split it 50-50 and you want to make it as fair as possible, that makes the most sense. I think that's a thing that people complain about in the NFL preseason a lot is like, how are you, evaluating some of these backup players when they're, playing with and against other backup players. It's something that I've been kind of monitoring with the Browns quarterback situation with Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. Like a lot of people are saying that, you can't really judge Shedeur Sanders as much because he's playing with, the third and fourth string linemen, whereas Dylan Gabriel gets to play with the backup linemen. And so that I think that kind of calculus does matter. And that's why I'd like to see them work with both quarterbacks.
All right. Now, we need to stick with this because obviously, having a rotation at center, one of the air traffic control spots on the football field. This is a really big deal. So we need to flesh this out before we move on to other stories heading into Missouri State. In line with what you just said, that you want to get both quarterbacks or all quarterbacks getting some time with each of the two centers, at least to some extent. And I think that's a very reasonable, well thought out point. that would seem to influence the play selection and how Lincoln Riley's going to script this game, how he's going to order the play calls, and how I think he's going to want to go about this game. And I'm operating under the presumption that, yes, he's going to want each quarterback to work with each center, because that makes sense, right? You want to see how again, not judging the rotation plan. It's just, if you're bothering to have a rotation, there's a certain way to do it. And I think you make an excellent point. If you're going to bother to have a rotation, then yes, the different quarterbacks and centers, they need to all get some time on the field. That's why you're playing a cupcake in week 1. It's precisely so that you have these different combinations. You get to see all of them, and then upon evaluating Missouri State, maybe then you solidify the rotation a little bit against Georgia Southern next week to get some continuity heading into Purdue in the Big Ten schedule. But like, this is the mad scientist lab game, right? This is the time to experiment. This is the time to learn what you have and get experiences on film, get different combinations on film so that you can make evaluations going forward to set the table. So with that in mind, having each quarterback get a different experience, that would seem to me it's going to adjust the first quarter play calling more in the direction of passing. And for people who want USC to run the ball, and hey, I agree. I think Lincoln Riley needs to be running the ball more. But again, if you're having a rotation, I think this does move the needle toward more passing in the first quarter for this reason, right? USC should be able to get the ball to Micaiah Lemon, should be able to get the ball to its fast guys in space, build a lead, and then you can focus more on running the ball in the second half. So that way you're getting your O'Connor and Reed. Again, if you're rotating them, you get O'Connor and Reed pass blocking for their quarterbacks in the first half. And then you can have O'Connor and Reed run blocking more in the second half. Not exclusively, but I think this moves the needle. I think like there's just the percentages, the ratios. It suggests, it doesn't guarantee it, but it suggests to me, all right, if we're rotating centers, we need to see them in pass blocking situations, both of them. That means more throwing in the first half, and then you count on having a lead, and then you can run the ball, middle of the game, second half on into the fourth quarter. Ethan, your thoughts on how much you think this would affect the play sheet, the sequencing, how Lincoln Riley constructs his offensive game plan in the first half and especially the first quarter?
I think you're right on there. I do think that this will play into, because I think you're right. I think you want to see Killian O'Connor and John Ray Reed, in both run and pass block protections. You want to see them, like you said, you essentially want to hopefully get, 30 minutes of film on each of them, or maybe it's 40-20 or however Lincoln Riley wants to do it. But you want to get film on both of them, doing both of the, both of the protections, or not just, because there's several different pass protections and run protections in the offense, obviously, but, the two main categories of run and pass. So, and because, that will determine what, that's going to play a big role in which center you end up picking, is, which one is the more well-rounded one, which one can function the best in run and in pass. I do think, though, that, taking a step back a little bit, there are a lot of different positions that I think USC is going to be evaluating in this game. We'll talk a little bit later about wide receiver. The running backs position is obviously another position that they're going to be taking a long look at, because, Lincoln Riley keeps championing this deep running back room, and, all three of them being great. Well, you have to kind of figure out who's going to be your number one guy, so who you're going to rely on in the clutch. So they're probably going to be looking at that. so I just think that there are a lot more elements at play than just the center. I don't think that it's not like USC has every other position so locked down that they're going to exclusively play call based on how on getting film on both of these centers. So I think that because of the center situation, you're going to see more pass plays than you initially were going to, but I don't think they're going to abandon the run entirely. I do think, um, and I think it's going to be a little bit based on how the beginning of the game goes. Which is obvious, but I think that, regardless, you want to get up big early so you can, decide all of this talent evaluation, and more like, a baseball spring training game, and not like we actually need to win this football game. So put the football game away as soon as you possibly can. Call it like, it's a Big Ten game, a Big Ten conference game in the beginning. Try to just build that lead up, and then, figure out. But, other than, you want to keep some of the playbook in under wraps. Obviously, you don't want to show it all, and not to the point where you're injuring anybody or putting anybody at risk. But, call it like you're taking the opponent seriously as if they were a Big Ten opponent. Put the game away, and then worry a bit more about evaluating talent, I think.
All right. Any other thoughts on this? I think one other thing to consider briefly is maybe Jaden Mayava running option plays. To me, that might get shelved in this first game in favor of a more vanilla playbook. Like, I think maybe this simplifies what USC tries to do and how it tries to do it, because if you're rotating guys in, you don't want to overload in terms of the complexity of the playbook. You want to make things simpler, very structured. Like, you don't want to go deep into the grab bag. And of course, there's the added point. You don't want Illinois, Michigan State to see anything. So again, and people might be annoyed that I keep repeating this, but I just want to be very clear. I'm not judging or evaluating whether Lincoln Riley should be doing a rotation. I'm only saying if you're going to do a rotation, there is a way to do it. So to me, a rotation of centers means you're not going to use your most elaborate plays. Like that just makes common sense. Like, you start with basics. You're trying to build Jaden Mayava's confidence. You're trying to make sure Jaden Mayava has his football IQ in order, that he's going to make better decisions with the ball than he did in the small amount of work he had last season. So it would seem to me, Ethan, that this is going to simplify the playbook. We're not going to see option plays right off the bat. If we do see them in this game, maybe it would be an option play on like a 3rd and 1, short yardage, but like nothing overly fancy, like a play that designed to get 2 yards on 3rd and 1, but not trying to, spring game breakers with option plays, particularly complicated plays. Your thoughts on that particular line of analysis?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that when we talked about this a couple weeks ago, but when it comes down to it, this is not the kind of game, when you're playing teams like Illinois, when you're playing teams like Michigan, you want to have something in your bag in the fourth quarter that, the other team hasn't seen before, especially, when if you're struggling offensively, if some of these Big Ten defenses are a lot, stronger, and we can count on them to be a lot more just solid than, in the Pac-12 in years past. So I think you should be ready for a lot of defensive battles, a lot of slugfests, and especially with this offense, I think not having as clear of stars. There's a lot of guys who I think are going to be great football players this year, but it's not like years past where you had Caleb Williams and Jordan Addison. So I think the onus falls a little bit more on Lincoln Riley and his play calling. So I think that his play calling strategy and, keeping some of his cards close to his chest matters a lot more than in previous years, because, if you ran some of USC's more complicated plays against Rice in 2022, it wasn't going to matter against, you know, the teams that they played in the future, like Notre Dame, because they were going to, put up a crooked number on them anyway. Like there was just no stopping those guys that year. So, yeah, I'd agree. I think, keeping it close to the chest, just not trying to do too much, just trying to play really solid fundamental football. And it's good too for getting the players' feet wet in the right way, like letting them go out there, make simple plays, win a football game, gain confidence in themselves before you try anything too complicated. I think that's the way to go for sure.
All right, moving along. Another big story: Jakeem Stewart injured. I've seen comments, speculation that he might be 50-50 for this game. Ethan, let's just say, for the sake of argument, we're not treating this as fact, just as a hypothetical. If he is 50-50, the obvious question: do you play him? Should Lincoln Riley, should Danton Lynn play him, or do you hold him out and wait for Georgia Southern?
I think if he's 50-50, he should be 0-100, and the 100 should be him sitting. But yeah, here's the report that he's 50-50 to debut this weekend. He still has a boot on his right foot. Yeah, I think I don't think that there's any reason to trot him out there. I get the argument that he's a freshman and that, he hasn't really proven anything, but this is a 5-star guy. This is a guy who you want to be one of your future stars. I don't think that it's worth, pushing him whatsoever. I think that this optic right here is enough for me. If he was in a walking boot just 4 or 5 days before his potential college debut, and his college debut was against, a traditional FCS school that just this year moved into the FBS, a team that people are projecting you to beat by like 35 or more points, that'd be an automatic no for me. And especially USC has such a deep defensive line this year. It's not like they need him to defeat Missouri State or anything, and it gives them plenty of opportunity to look at a lot of other guys. I mean, maybe you want to put him out there for like a series or two just to get some college football experience. Like if you're super duper sure that he's really healthy, which again, if he's in a walking boot fight, on the Tuesday before a Saturday game, I doubt that that'll be the case. But if you're really sure and all the doctors are really sure that he's super healthy, maybe, like I said, you put him out there for like a series or two, just so it's like, hey, this is college football. This is what it's like. Get that experience so that, you can learn from it and get, ready for Georgia Southern next week. But personally, like just seeing this photo, if I was, in a position to decide whether he was going to play or not, I just immediately be like, no, you're going to, we're going to take it easy with you and you'll make your debut against Georgia Southern.
Yep, I think it's a pretty easy call, quite frankly. Like if you just give him a week, you play him lightly against Georgia Southern to kind of, like, that can be the game where you test out his endurance, his fitness, and then you make sure that he's ready to go when you get into the Big Ten in week 3. Like that just seems to be the pretty obvious thing. All right, continuing with our news and notes. An injured kicker. Now, you don't think that Missouri State's going to come down to a field goal, so really, this seems to be more of an issue where you just hope that your kicker is ready by the time you get to Michigan State and especially Illinois. Like, Illinois is going to be a game that very reasonably will, not just could, but will go down to the wire, and you're going to need a reliable kicker in that game. But you want your best kicker to be available for Michigan State because you want a taste of Big Ten pressure before the Illinois game, so that if your kicker is less than brilliant, less than perfect against Michigan State, well, that he can kind of achieve a mental reset going to Champaign for the Illinois game. So not a crisis by any means right now, but you do want to get this straightened out in the next few weeks. Your observations on the kicker situation.
Yeah, I mean, you have a lot of great points there, Matt. I don't think it's anything to freak out about. I mean, some of these headlines you're going to say like is going to miss week 1, may miss more time. Lincoln Riley says he doesn't think it'll be too long. He reiterated that multiple times. I think it's really interesting, this kicker that we're going to see instead of him, Ryan Sayuri. He actually came on in the Texas A&M game as a substitute for Eddie Chapliski after he got hurt at punter, and made the 157-yard punt. So, ironically, USC's getting to see a special teams player that they've actually seen before. It was very brief, but kind of exciting career for a guy, Ryan Sayuri, who's been a backup both of his years. There's so many backup kickers and holders and punters on every college roster, and most of them never see the field. But hey, he's getting to play in a couple of college games here, so good for him. He crushed a 50+ yard punt in the Texas A&M game, and now we'll see if he can also handle kicking field goals and kicking it. Hopefully it's just a lot of extra points and not any field goals, because USC's not getting stopped in the red zone by Missouri State. But kind of interesting. But yeah, I think it's always a bit of a complicated situation with injury updates in Lincoln Riley. So I think if this starts to drag out, if he does miss the Purdue game, then it's something to start being concerned about. And I don't think it's a reason to worry about Caden Chittenden either. Like, I don't think he is the kind of kicker that we need to be really concerned about him needing a bunch of run up to these these games. I think that whenever he's healthy, he'll be ready to go. I mean, he was Mountain West Kicker of the Year, and we talked a couple weeks ago about one of the reasons the U.S. staff went out and got him is because they're really confident about his in-game kicking ability. So I don't think that he needs the mental run up or the that kind of thing. Like, it's not like if he doesn't play in the first couple games, I think he's going to be super rattled against Purdue or Michigan State. I think he'll be ready to go. So just based on my evaluation of him and everything that the USC staff has said about him thus far. So yeah, I think not a huge crazy story, but again, if anything, it's kind of a fascinating story for this Ryan Sayuri kid who got to punt in a bowl game and now gets to kick on opening day for USC the next season. Kind of a crazy college career for the kid so far, but it'll be fun to root for him and support him, because like I said, he's not a guy who's probably going to get a ton of opportunities, and he's hopefully waiting out because Caden Chittenden is also pretty young, and USC hopes to have him around for several more years. So to Ryan Sayuri, obviously take advantage of the opportunity and have some fun out there at the Coliseum for sure.
All right, continuing our USC news and notes, Ethan, there's something about the wide receiver room and how Lincoln Riley and the offensive staff plan to use the wide receivers. Let's dive into that particular item.
Yeah, so obviously the USC number 1 and number 2 wide receivers are pretty set. We've known for months and months now that that's going to be Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane there. But the number 3 wide receiver has been a bit of a question mark. Zacharias Williams, based on just kind of his career thus far, and the potential that a lot of coaches have seen in him at his previous stops, has been kind of the favorite to be that number 3 wide receiver. But Prince Strahan, the Boise State transfer, has thrown his name into that hat. Jay Fair is a younger guy that a lot of media members and a lot of staff are still pretty high on, a lot of fans too. And then Tanu Kynes is a freshman who has seemingly had a really good camp, and Lincoln Riley's had a lot of good stuff to say about. So I don't know. I mean, I counted, I think, 6 receivers on this list that Lincoln Riley says are all going to, get some run on Saturday. And yeah, so he also says that the 3rd wide receiver spot is going to evolve, and that all of these guys have intriguing skill sets. So, this again could be a thing that he's saying just to kind of, mislead some opposing defenses and defensive coordinators, because obviously you're going to play all of these guys regardless against an opponent like Missouri State, because hopefully you have the starters out by halftime or the middle of the 3rd quarter, because you're up by so many points. So, even if USC didn't have issues at the wide receiver, or not issues, but even if USC didn't have competition at the wide receiver 3, getting all these guys some run is something that they're going to do anyway. But, it is another, just like I said, another interesting story to to monitor, because not a super established, lots of people have had different opinions on who's going to step up, whether that's going to be Zacharias Williams or Prince Strahan. And then a lot of these younger guys, it sounds like people are pretty high on. So, even if they're not ready to step up and be the wide receiver 3 this year, perhaps next year after Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane leave, because that's going to leave 2 big voids in the receiving room. So yeah, just kind of like the center position, another position where it seems like guys are going to be rotating in, even, before all the starters are out. We're going to see multiple different guys there, multiple different looks, and just another position to monitor and seeing for some of these more important games later in the season. Just, who kind of does well and who is kind of separating themselves as the likely starter there. Cause game results matter a lot. So, but I don't know, Matt, you have any additional thoughts on this topic?
Well, my main thing is for this number 3 wide receiver position, because this is the less experienced and less proven receiver spot behind the 2 studs, Lemon and Lane. The key point of emphasis for a week 1 game is you're not going to give these number 3 wide receivers the kinds of routes where if you make a mistake, it could be a pick 6 the other way, right? Like, you don't give them curl routes. You don't give them sit-down routes. You don't give them out routes where, like, if you don't make the right break, the cornerback can jump the route for a pick 6. You give them either safe passes like a bubble screen, where it's just, you're basically just catching an extended handoff, or you're going 40, 50 yards down the field so that if the ball is intercepted, it's just an arm punt. You're not losing field position. So that's the thing that Lincoln Riley will need to pay attention to. You're not going to give them routes where a mistake could translate into disaster. You want to give them either safe plays or just, plays where the wrong outcome carries fewer negative consequences. So that's the particular item I have on that one. All right, so we've made it through the initial set of news and notes. More on what we're looking for in this Missouri State game, but that's going to be after this advertisement. Take a break for 45 seconds.
You can make a difference here at the Voice of College Football. Use the Amazon link. Financially contribute to the Voice of College Football without spending a penny. Same shopping experience. It's easy. Go to any video on any channel. Go to the description section and grab the link right next to the capital letters that say Amazon. Use that link, and Amazon will instantaneously convert to your account, settings, history, everything intact, just like whatever link you use right now. No difference. Pay no attention to the product that you see right there. Just go search what you want. Don't forget the Amazon link. Thank you for your support. Sincerely, the Voice of College Football.
And we remind you that Mark Rogers' program, the Voice of College Football, his national college football show, comes at you every weeknight, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. And, if you're trying to support the Voice of College Football, and specifically if you're trying to support the USC channel, there's a way you can do this. Just go to vocfb.com. That's our website, vocfb.com/shop. And you get this screen. So with the VOCFB logo, the hats, there's a USC version of these hats. So if you get a USC VOCFB hat or another piece of merch, that supports Ethan and myself here at the USC channel. So vocfb.com/shop, and that takes you to this link, vocfb shop.fourthwall.com, but vocfb.com/shop gets you there. That's good enough. It's pretty easy. And of course, you want to just visit our site, vocfb.com. Plenty of coverage on all things college football. Here you go. So lots of stuff on Notre Dame and Miami. You see Clemson and LSU. And you get the list of all the different shows here at the Voice of College Football. So there's definitely a way that you can support our USC channel, and we remind you that when we do the Sunday afternoon, day after post-game show, we'll be offering the chance to stay on with you for 3 hours. We guarantee 1 free hour, but if you want a second hour of Ethan and Matt, if you want a third hour with Ethan and Matt, then super chats are the way to make that happen, and that helps support Ethan, myself, also the voice of college football. All right, so as we continue with our show, there's more to discuss in terms of USC versus Missouri State. Obviously, we talked about several pertinent news stories that will affect how USC and Lincoln Riley go about this game. But Ethan, so plenty of other stories to look for. It's Rob Ryan's USC debut as linebacker coach. That's a plot point. It's Zach Hansen's USC debut as offensive line coach. To me, and people will not be surprised about this, Zach Hansen, needing to prove himself. And some people think he's the real deal. Hey, I hope he is. But, he has to prove it. He has to go out and show it. So to me, that's what I'm looking for in this game. Is number one. I'm looking at a lot of things. But number one, how does the offensive line play? And, of course, against Missouri State, you should be able to have a game where the offensive line looks really, really good. And people might say, and this might be an interesting point to talk about, Ethan, just while we're on the offensive line, before we get to other talking points, maybe such as Rob Ryan or others. But, maybe the first few drives are a little bit rusty, ragged, and you say, well, it's week 1. You don't get a preseason game in this sport. But other people might say, you know what? It's really important for this offensive line to start, roaring out of the gate, because didn't start well at Michigan, didn't start well at Minnesota. This offensive line, from the moment this season begins, from the moment this Missouri State game begins, needs to be on it. That's the new identity. That's the new culture. So I think it's an interesting and worthwhile question to kick around. Is first quarter rust acceptable in this game or not? Do we really need to see this team get after it on the offensive line right out of the gate? And if it doesn't happen, how concerned should we be? And of course, that runs up against the annual point: don't overreact to a first game, don't overreact to one game. That's legitimate. But if we really do want to see this team and Lincoln Riley and Zach Hansen raise the bar, we need to see that crispness. We need to see that fluidity and efficiency from the start, so that we know, okay, everyone means business. Guys are locked in. It's going to be better this year. Where do you come down on that, Ethan?
Yeah, I think I'm looking for the offensive line to come out and be dominant pretty immediately. I just think that, you're playing basically an FCS team. Missouri State just moved to the FBS this year, but looking at their roster, they're, returning a lot of the same guys, and they were, a decent but even not upper echelon FCS team last year. They got dominated by, both South Dakota and North Dakota states. They're not even the upper echelon of the FCS, and there's maybe 3-4 new transfers in their starting lineup, but it's a lot of returners. It's a lot of returners. Not a lot of big impact freshmen that are expected to make an impact. They're returning basically top to bottom all the same guys. So I just don't see how, if you're coaching, if you're Zach Hansen coaching the offensive line, if you're Lincoln Riley coaching this team, you don't send a message that we need to be dominant from the first snap of this game, because we are simply in a different class of football players than this team. This is not, it's not like, going into a couple of drives against Michigan last year, or, the big road game against Illinois, where you can chalk it up to the atmosphere, or, them finally playing a worthwhile opponent. No, this is a different class of football player. So I want to see them come out and be dominant from the jump. We talked a little bit earlier about Killian O'Connor's, pretty confident quote that he said about he didn't come to be a bag holder. Nobody on this offensive line came to USC to be dominated players. So I just want to see them assert themselves. I want to see them just kind of bull over the the Missouri State defense from the get-go. And because of that, I think it might even be wise for, if USC wins the toss, for Lincoln Riley to receive, just because, setting that tone offensively. I think that's more important for the offense than the defense, because I think the defense is a little bit more of a sure thing. And I think that I'm more confident that they're going to dominate than I am confident in the offense. So if I'm trying to set the tone, if I'm trying to get the game off to a great start, if I'm trying to get the offense off to a great start, I put the ball in my offense's hands immediately and I say, hey, go put us up 7-0 and give us a lead we're not going to relinquish.
So one more question about the offensive line before we move to other position groups and other talking points connected to the Missouri State game. So they're rotating at center, but you have the 4 other spots pretty much solidified and established. Of those 4 spots, where are you going to be focusing on against Missouri State? And correct me if I'm wrong, Ethan, but the conventional wisdom doesn't necessarily mean that the conventional wisdom will turn out to be right, but just like the prevailing sense of where this offensive line stands, Elijah Page is supposed to be the rock, the anchor of this line, correct? Like that seems to be the majority view, if not a unanimous view.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he had a really great kind of turnaround at the end of last season, and he's also just huge. Like the left side of the offensive line is massive. So I think that just looking at them from a size alone perspective, they should be dominant in this game, and yeah, they should be the guys who nobody needs to worry about.
So where are you going to be looking at on the offensive line other than the center position? Because center is going to be all of our top point of focus. But what's going to be the other? So I guess the non-center, non-Elijah Page spot on the offensive line that you think carries the most intrigue heading into the Missouri State game.
That's a good question. I think that it's kind of a tie between everywhere else. I don't know. I just think that there's so many other kind of, so much other uncertainty, so many other players that.
It's not a bad answer.
Yeah, I just think that, yeah, I mean, Elijah Page is supposed to be the rock. Killian O'Connor, that whole center situation, we already covered that. I just think, Alani Noah is also supposed to be pretty good. So, seeing if he can kind of be the 1B to Elijah Page's 1A, that's definitely, something to keep an eye on, if that, left side of the line can really be that dominant. But I mean, outside of that, or actually, Alani Noah, anyways, outside of them, the other spots have kind of been up in the air throughout the offseason. So just kind of seeing who, if the guys who end up starting that game, sort of establish themselves. I think that, I saw Lincoln Riley already named the starter, so at least we have starters, and, it's not all like a rotation like the center position. But, those are guys that I think are not in a position to where you can definitively say that they're going to start the entire season either. So, just kind of seeing how they establish themselves, seeing how the backups do if they're put in the game. But yeah, I think it's more than like any one position that I'm looking at. It's just more of like a grand, kind of big picture thing that I'm looking at of just who really establishes themselves, and like if there's kind of a significant drop off between, Elijah Page, Alani Noah, and then everyone else, or if everyone's kind of playing as a unit and those other players can kind of step up and be just as dominant as those guys.
So Jeff Rodriguez comes in, our friend Jeff Rodriguez, loyal viewer, listener. Noah needs to step up his game. He started, but he's never been a strength despite his frame and athleticism. I'm with Jeff here. I have more confidence. I do think Elijah Page is the rock. I'm relatively comfortable and confident with Tobias Raymond. Alani Noah, to me, that's the pressure point. To me, that's where USC really needs to be better up front. I think Alani Noah is the guy under the gun who really needs to step it up from last season. So that would kind of be where I would focus a little bit more in terms of the USC offensive line. If Alani Noah is right, then it could really all come together. Obviously, also the center position as well. But Alani Noah, I think, is the in terms of non-center question marks, that would be the one for me.
Yeah, for sure. I think, and my mistake, I mistakenly named Alani Noah as the left guard. He'll probably play right guard, and Tobias Raymond's the left guard. And then the other announced starter is at right tackle, and that is going to be Justin Taunau. So, interesting to see how he does as well, because I don't think that he's a guy that, everyone is confident is going to start the whole season. So right side of the offensive line, definitely for sure. Justin Taunau is the one besides the center position that I feel like his starting job is the least established. So just seeing if he can kind of separate himself and play on the same level as everybody else for sure. And then, at the guards, if those guys can be the 1B and the 1C to Elijah Page's 1A, we're going to be in really good shape.
All right, let's go to the defensive side of the ball. And people will say, wait, you didn't talk about the running backs. You know what? One, I think we're good at running back. I think we have a great group at running back, but it's partly how Lincoln Riley uses the running backs, in terms of run the damn ball, but also rotating guys, keeping them fresh instead of leaning on one guy, making sure your RB2 and your RB3, which are very talented, get carries, like we don't want to do a Quentin Joyner repeat where you had this really talented stud in the stable and he just didn't get the rock nearly as often as he could have or should have. So the running backs I think are good, but they're contingent on how the coaches use them and how well the offensive line plays. Also, how well Jaden Mayava plays as well. So that, if you're thinking, wait, this is USC and you're not talking about the running backs, well, there are other pieces of the puzzle that need to fall into place first, and I think the running back room will take care of itself if those other pieces are aligned properly. So we go to the defense. Ethan, what's going to be your first top defensive storyline point of focus against Missouri State? You do have the Rob Ryan angle, but you also have this really deep defensive line, that's supposed to be, notably deeper than it was last season. But there's also the secondary, and of course, when you're a huge favorite and you're playing a cupcake game, one of the ways a cupcake game can become uncomfortable is if, like the cornerback has a coverage bust, a guy in the secondary has a misread and you get an 80-yard touchdown on one play, might not decide the game, but could make it less comfortable. So D-line, linebacker, secondary, where are you starting off in terms of your primary points of focus against Missouri State?
I think there's really two primary storylines that I'm going to be looking at. There's one that I think I'm confident in, and it's more going to be a positive fascination thing. And then the other one that I'm not as confident in, and it's going to be more of like a worried fascination thing. I think the one I'm confident in is the defensive line. I think the defensive line is going to be good. I just think it's fascinating. It's going to be fascinating to see who plays the most, who starts, who's the most productive, because the offensive line is just so big and so much more talented than it's been in past years that I don't think it, I don't think
defensive line.
Yeah, defensive line is so much bigger and so much more talented than it's been in past years that I don't really anticipate the Missouri State offensive line keeping up with them. So defensive line I'm excited about them, but I think that, that is something to look at. And then the one that I'm more concerned about that I think is something to watch is the secondary. I just think that, they're dealing with injuries to a couple of players. They're talking about playing freshman Alex Graham a lot. So I just think, and he's supposedly really talented. So, I think that it has the potential to be kind of a coming out game for him if he really does play as much as they're kind of implying that he's going to. But I just, thinking back to some of those games in 2023, I mean, they played Nevada in week 2, and there was like a big blowout, like in the 60s to 14 or something like that. But the 14 were like 2 70-yard touchdowns that they just like kind of magically got out of nowhere, and that ended up being a big kind of red flag for the rest of the 2023 season. So I think it's like you said, I think you don't want to see them give up those big plays. And I just think I'm a little less confident in the secondary than I am in the linebacker group and in the defensive line group. So I really want to see them dominate, especially against you've got a quarterback on Missouri State he's a 6th-year senior, so he's experienced and he's been around the block because he was at Minnesota and now he's at Missouri State, but he's not a guy who's been great. I mean, last year was his first year starting, and again, it took him 5 years to start in an FCS school. So I really want to see, the secondary dominate, get a couple of interceptions, really never let him get comfortable, blanket all of his best receivers, and just make him look like an FCS quarterback that's playing against one of the top programs and the top defenses in the country. So, I think that's imperative, and that's what's going to most boost my confidence in the defense for the season, is if they can do that.
Okay, let's talk about this game in terms of statistical categories and elements of play. Things that coaches are always looking for on the stat sheet. Which item jumps out to you as something that you think you want to see a lot of? Obviously, any positive impact, any positive production is welcome and important, and you want to see guys immediately make plays and evolve and build confidence for the road ahead. But like, if you had to pick one, maybe two lanes of statistical production on defense, what would they be? Are we talking about turnovers? We're talking about deflections. We're talking about sacks. We're talking about negative plays. Getting off the field consistently on third down, making sure Missouri State's average third down is like 7 yards or more, not getting into 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4, 3rd and 2. So a lot of different dimensions in terms of what represents a really, really good start for USC on the defensive side of the ball in this game. Time of possession as well. Are you allowing Missouri State to control the clock? Are you getting off the field quickly? Which statistical lane or lanes are you most interested in on the defensive side of the ball against Missouri State?
I think number one, and it's one of the flashier ones, is I want to see them get a lot of sacks, just because I saw something today that Braylon Shelby led the team in sacks last year, and I was like, and that was like such a surprise to me. I was like, I didn't even realize that he did, but that's just because nobody got any sacks last year. That was nobody got to the quarterback last year. Which, shout out to Braylon Shelby for making that much of an impact as a freshman. But nobody got to the quarterback. So I just think finishing plays, especially because this is, like we've reiterated over and over, this is a talented defensive line, but this is not the defensive line that's put up, big statistical seasons in years past. Like, there's nobody on this defensive line that you're looking at that you're like, future first-round draft pick for sure, because they, have this body of work in college that speaks for itself. There's nobody like that. So getting to the quarterback, racking up some sacks, that's, one for sure. And then just getting off the field. I just want, I want to see a lot of 3-and-outs. I want USC to dominate time of possession in this game. If USC gets a couple of interceptions and, a bunch of pass breakups, great. But more than that, I just, want to see no big plays, get off the field, no drama when Missouri State has the ball, just, get it out of their hands, make it to where they can't really run anything, and their offensive coordinator has no answer, and just get off the field.
Our friend Russ Campbell, loyal listener to the show, says, gotta be sacks, gotta get to the QB. Now, Russ, hey, in like the month of May, I thought Missouri State was a Division II FCS team, so it's not as though I was like, I knew this all the way or I was on top of it. But just so you know, Missouri State is Conference USA. So this is an FBS game for USC. But again, I'm not claiming the high ground here, because I didn't know this until like May, June, around Memorial Day. So I'm really no better than you are. All right, folks. On the other side of this next advertisement, picking the Big Ten. We're going to pick some games each week. Like, that's part of the fun of football season, right? You pick some games. So that's coming up just on the other side of this ad, which is pretty thematically appropriate.
College football is even more exciting when you've got some action on the line, and the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread, and I've got a 40-plus year track record. 11-0 in the college football playoff for me last year against the money line, 8-3 against the spread. And I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill of Wager Talk is our ace in the hole show stopper. 7 years with the voice of college football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick. 28-12 against the spread the last 3 years. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Corey Bratta, Matt Zemek, and Steve Dace. Check out those numbers. Become a YouTube or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click join, and then select the betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2025 a winner now.
All right, let's pick the Big Ten on the heels of that predictions advertisement for the Voice of College Football. So USC minus 35.5. The over/under for this game 59.5. Ethan, your picks.
I'd pick USC to cover, and I'd also hit the over. I do think that they're going to put up a lot of points in this game. If Jade Mailava really is as improved as Lincoln Riley is saying that he is, then he's going to run and throw circles around Missouri State. Like I said, we clarified that they're an FBS team now, but it's their first FBS game ever. They're returning basically all their starters, so essentially they're an FCS team. I see this one getting out of hand really quickly and USC putting up a crooked number on the board.
All right, I would lean. In making predictions, you have a lean, or you're 100% confident, or you'd have no clue. I lean toward USC minus the 35.5, but with Jacoby Lane not being maybe 100%, or having had the injury over the season, maybe he doesn't have maximum impact on this game, and just rotating centers that could just muck up the gears a little bit, and USC could win this game 35-0, and that's not a cover for USC, but I would lean 35.5. But my strong play, where I feel very confident, is the under. Like, I don't think Missouri State's going to score anything more than 7. So that means, USC 52, Missouri State 7. That's an under. And I think that the score of the game is going to be in that kind of range. USC 45-7 sounds just about right for me. So I feel solid about the under, because Missouri State's just not going to get much of anything. Maybe a garbage touchdown. And of course, garbage touchdowns mean a lot for, as Brent Musburger was fond of saying, our friends in the desert. So that's where I'm leaning on that game. All right, let's stay in Southern California. Obviously, we hate the Bruins, but they play a really interesting and important game. Utah favored by 6 over UCLA with an over/under of 51.5. Ethan, your picks.
I think I'm taking the under in this game for sure. I just don't see, a Utah offense that struggled a lot last year and, is trying to gain its footing again, and a UCLA offense that's playing its first game with Nico Iamaleava. I just don't see, those two combining for a shootout. I do think, though, that in terms of who I'm picking for this game, as much as I hate to say it, I think I'm picking UCLA, just because I think that I think that Utah is going to be better this year than they were last year, but I just don't see, I don't feel confident enough that they're going to get off to as great of a start in a game on the road. Granted, the Rose Bowl is not exactly a home field disadvantage, because nobody shows up to these games. But, if you're a UCLA fan, you hope that some more people show up, because it's like an actual opponent in this first week, even though students aren't in school yet. But I just see, I don't know. I think it's going to be a close game. And, when it comes down to it, Nico Iamaleava, as a true freshman, was in the college football playoff last year. So I just think when it comes down to it being in the clutch, I can see UCLA pulling this one out.
All right. I have Utah money line, but I think UCLA covers the 6. I think it's going to be a close game. I would lean under, but really this is not a game where I would risk betting money. Like, so, I'm going to make picks, but I'm going to say whether I have strong confidence or no confidence. I'd say this tilts toward the no confidence, because these teams are mysteries, and it's week one. And part of the wisdom of betting as you go through this is don't bet on everything. Know when to not bet. There are games that you should bet so that you make money, but there are also the games that you don't bet because they're very coin flippy. You don't want to lose money, right? You want to keep your bankroll, so don't get sucked into a trap. A game that's a coin flip and you really are flying blind. Don't bet on questionable games that you don't have a feel for. It's part of the art of betting. So Utah UCLA fits into that category. But of course, I'm picking the Utes. I'm picking the Bruins to lose. That's how we do it here on the USC channel at the Voice of College Football. All right, a few games that don't need extended analysis, but just Rutgers minus 15.5 over Ohio, over under 49.5. Ethan.
I think I think I pick Ohio to cover just because I think that, Rutgers was just, such a sad Big Ten program last year. And I think that Ohio is coming off a conference championship season. So I think that they're going to have some confidence and make this a little bit more competitive than people think. But I'm taking the under. I think this is going to be, I don't have confidence in either offense to put up a crooked number. It being Ohio playing against a superior conference opponent, and then Rutgers just, being Rutgers. So I'm taking the under, but I'm taking Ohio to cover.
I would lean in those two directions, but I don't have a strong opinion there. Before we go to the next one, Jeff Rodriguez, thank you, $10 super chat. And hey, Jeff, just loyal friend, supporter of the show, and he loves those 3-hour shows. But folks, it can't just be Jeff, right? And Adam Lamparello, who is the host of the Rutgers show at the Voice of College Football. Hope you're tuning into his Rutgers program. He's not a regular listener watcher now because he has his Rutgers obligations. So other people are going to need to pick up the slack. It can't just be Jeff and Adam's doing a show, hosting a show at another channel. So if you want 2 hours of Ethan and Matt, 3 hours of Ethan and Matt, hey folks, help out Jeff. Do some matching donations. Once again, like $150 might seem like Fort Knox, but it just means 15 people stepping up just like Jeff with a $10 super chat. 15 people donating $10. Then you're spreading the responsibility, and you're just contributing $10. Not a king's ransom. Okay, so that's how it works. That's how you can get a second hour of Ethan and Matt when we do our Sunday post game and when we do our upcoming Tuesday football season shows here on the USC channel. So thanks again, Jeff. As we continue on again, and this is kind of lightning round, Ethan. Minnesota minus 17.5 over Buffalo. Another Big Ten versus MAC game. The over/under there 44.5.
I am taking Minnesota to. I'm taking the over. I'm taking Minnesota money line. Sorry, but I think I'm taking the under here.
You're taking Minnesota to cover the 17.5.
Yes, but I'm taking the under.
You're taking the under.
Yeah,
I would lean. I'm leaning Buffalo and under, but not a strong take. Like I would not say, hey, you got to bet on this game. All right, here's one where we can go a little deeper because this is an interesting one. This is one of the Thursday primetime games on national television. Nebraska versus Cincinnati, and it's not an on-campus game. This is at Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City. Nebraska favored by a touchdown, exactly 7, not 7.5. Like, see that, and that half point can be really interesting from a betting standpoint. Nebraska minus 7, the over/under 52.5. Your picks.
I think that Nebraska is going to be better than everybody. Than like everybody's giving them credit for. So I'm taking them to cover the 7. I think the over/under is a tough one because I think it's going to be right around there. I see Nebraska's offense really kind of, making a statement in this game, so I see them putting up a good amount of points. But I don't think, their defense is strong enough that I'm confident that they're going to hold Cincinnati to a super low total. I'm going to take a slight under, but again, just kind of leaning in that direction, not super confident.
I have no clue about the over/under, but I'm not hammering, but I do like Nebraska -7. And if there's line movement such that I can grab Nebraska -6.5, see if that line just dips that half point, and I can get Nebraska -6.5, I'd feel great about Nebraska -6.5. But I'll still take Nebraska fairly confidently at -7. Scott Satterfield, the head coach of Cincinnati, he's on the hot seat. Remember, he used to be at Appalachian State, then he went to Louisville. His career trajectory has gone down, down, down. And this is a must-win for Matt Rule and Nebraska. Dana Holgerson coaching Dylan Raiola. You would think that Nebraska comes out of the gate roaring, trying to prove a point. So I really do like Nebraska at 7. I would love Nebraska -6.5, but I'm still feel very solid about Nebraska -7. All right, another Big Ten MAC cupcake game, Wisconsin -17.5 over Miami, Ohio, and the over/under 39.5. So Wisconsin is not expected to score a ton of points, but also it's not expected to give up any. Ethan.
Yeah, I mean, a really interesting over/under there. I just feel like this is I just don't think I have a ton of trust in Wisconsin being dominant. I don't think this is a game I personally would bet on either direction. But I think if I had to pick, I'd pick Miami to cover, to be completely honest with you, just because I still think Wisconsin's going to win this game, but I just don't. After the way the past few years have gone for the Badgers, I don't really feel super confident in them running away with this one. And then the over/under is real low. Again, I just in case Wisconsin is better than I think that they're going to be. I haven't seen them play any football yet. I really wouldn't be confident in taking the under here, but not super confident in the over either, just because it's really a toss-up here for me.
Ethan, totally agree. This is an ambush. This is a trap. Don't do it. Stay away. I totally agree. This game, you stay away. If you don't trust a team, you don't go ahead and bet on that team if you don't trust it. So if you don't have a good feel, stay the heck away. That's what I'm going to be doing with that game. Michigan State -20.5 over Western Michigan, over/under 49.5.
Ooh.
Okay, while you're thinking about it, I'm going to say I'm not going to – it's not a strong – I feel awesome about it, but I have a definite lean toward Western Michigan covering the points. We need to see Michigan State prove that it can be really solid, efficient, fluid. I got to at least see a game. So I'm not sure I'd put money on this game, but if I had to lean – it would be Western Michigan plus the 20.5.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you. And I think that I'd also lean towards taking the under, just because I don't 49.5 is quite, that's like a 35-14 game. I don't know. I don't have enough confidence in Michigan State's offense after the way the last few years have gone. So I think I'm taking the under there as well. But again, not a super confident, just a little bit of a lean there for me as well.
All right. Washington Huskies -21.5 over Colorado State with an over/under of 53.5. Ethan. Okay. While you make up your mind, I'm gonna stay away. I can easily see Washington blowing the doors off this game, and I can just as easily see Washington struggling in a week 1 situation. Jed Fish, year 2, you would generally think he'll get this thing figured out, but is he going to figure it out in week 1? Are you going to see an improved Washington team right away? So I think this is definitely a stay away game. Yeah, I think that's the best way to do it. I don't even really have a lean on this one. This is a stay away game for me.
I agree. I mean, I just think it's never a fantastic idea to bet on a team that was in the national championship game 2 years ago and then was mediocre the year after. You just never know what you're going to get there. It's also the Mountain West, which like the Mountain West always seems to kind of bat above its league. And, like they're, especially against the Pac-12, which, this is not a Pac-12 team anymore. But some of those Mountain West Pac-12 teams at the end of the Pac-12 were really, really entertaining. I think about, some of the games Fresno State played, a Colorado State game that happened recently. So I just, I'm never confident that any team is, unless we're talking like a really, top 5 team. I'm never really confident in any team blowing out a Mountain West team. So I'd stay away personally.
Michigan and Bryce Underwood minus 34.5 against New Mexico, over under 49.5.
I think this is one where I'm confident in Michigan covering. Actually, no, I'm going to change. I'm going to change my mind. I'm confident in the over, but I'm not quite as confident in Michigan covering, just because I think that you're going to see Michigan dominate this game regardless. I think that there's just too much talent on the roster. It's a freshman's first game though at under center, so I just don't know if I'm super confident that he's gonna throw 6 touchdowns. He's supposed to be the guy. Again, I need to see it first. So and New Mexico, again, not an FCS program by any means. I think that they'll come in hoping to compete at least for the first few quarters in this game. So I'd lean the over, not super confidently, and I'd probably take New Mexico to cover.
Yeah, I would not bet money on this game, but I would lean toward New Mexico just because Bryce Underwood, he could be a rock star, and the people in Ann Arbor definitely think he will be. But this is his first rodeo. This is his first game. If he plays a sluggish first quarter, first 20 minutes with a spread this large, I think New Mexico slight lean, but really I'm just going to sit and observe and enjoy that one. Penn State, many people think that this is the national title favorite. Penn State minus 44.5 against Nevada with an over-under of 56.5. So basically, like the models have, Penn State winning this game like, something close to like 50 to 7, or pretty close to that. Your pick on this?
I think I'm picking Penn State to cover, and I'm also hammering the over on this. I just hyped up a couple of minutes ago. I hyped up the Mountain West, but that stops at Nevada. I just don't think that they're going to be any good. I think it's going to be another bad year for them. And I'm just thinking about USC playing Nevada and it being like a 60-14 game. I think that Penn State is going to be for sure. Penn State this year is going to be for sure better than USC in 2023. I'm not confident in Nevada being any better than they were that year. So I just think it's going to be a massive, massive blowout. I think, you're going to hear the hype train on social media of this is definitely Drew Allar's year to win the Heisman, and it's going to be a massive overreaction because he's going to throw for like 6 touchdowns because Nevada's just that bad. Penn State all the way by a lot for sure.
I would lean Penn State minus the 44.5, but week 1 with that large a spread, like, do I want to just fork up dollars and just feel confident about it? Not quite, because we've seen Penn State make a meal of this kind of game before. Eked past Bowling Green last year. Obviously, Penn State better this year, but still. So I'd lean Penn State for sure against the spread, but would still ultimately stay away from that one. All right, Maryland minus 14.5 against Florida Atlantic, over under 59.5.
I just don't think you want to bet on Maryland at all based on the way the last few years have gone. So I'd stay away from this one as well. But if I'm going to pick, I'd pick Florida Atlanta to cover, and I definitely hammer the under, because even if this is a decisive Maryland win, I don't think it's going to be 40-14. I think it's going to be 21-10, 21-7, something like that. I just don't see any world where this is a high-scoring Maryland blowout.
Totally agree with, why trust Maryland, right? I very much agree. So my lean would be to FAU, but I do think that, Maryland's defense has been pretty horrific in recent seasons. And so if Maryland does not cover, it's going to be because FAU scores a few touchdowns. So the over-under, that I feel even less confident about the over-under than FAU plus 14.5, but I still would not bet money on that game. All right, Indiana, Kurt Signetti, minus 23.5 against Old Dominion, over-under 54.5.
Yeah, the over-under is quite high. I think Indiana covers the minus 24. I mean, it's Old Dominion, but I don't know if the scoring is that high. I think Indiana's defense is going to be pretty solid again, but I don't, it's Fernando Mendoza, the former Cal quarterback. So, a lot of people are pretty high on him, but he, it's not like he did anything at Cal. So I'm not confident in him, putting up a ton of points in this first game as much. So I think I'd lean under, again, not super confidently, but I do think Indiana covers because I just don't think Old Dominion is putting up more than 10 points against Indiana for sure.
Just a quick note, our friend Archer Quick, loyal listener, viewer of the show, he mentions Kyron Hudson, 1 TD. He's referring to Penn State, Hudson transferring to Penn State. We wish Kyron Hudson well, so interesting note on that game. Do want to circle back. DeMeadowsable, thank you for your $5 super chat. Getting a little super chat action here, revving up our engines for the season, preparing for potential 2 or 3 hour shows in the coming weeks. So DeMeadowsable, thank you very much for your generous $5 contribution. And once again, we don't want anyone to fork up, a C note, $100 the way Adam Lamparello did. I mean, we loved Adam Lamparello helping out myself and Tim Prangley last year, but that's not the model we envision, right? It's just, a bunch of people donating $5-10, 20, 25 people donating a small amount of money. That's how everyone shares in the fun. Everyone shares in the responsibility. You're not giving up, a full Sunday dinner or your electric bill or anything, just $5-10, but everyone pitching in. That's what we love here on the USC channel at the Voice of College Football. All right, just a couple more left. Now, Purdue, week 3 opponent for USC. So, this is an interesting team to watch under new head coach Barry Odom. Purdue, 18.5-point favorite at home against Ball State. The over-under 50.5. Ethan.
I think I'm hammering the under, and I'm also reasonably expecting Ball State to cover. I just don't, again, Purdue was just so abysmal last year that predicting them to win big in any game or put up a bunch of points is just not something I'd at all be confident in. So yeah, for sure, not preaching no confidence in them on both of those fronts.
Yeah, I would just say let's see Purdue play at least a half before making any kind of conclusion about this team. So that's definitely a game I would stay away from. Because Barry Odom's a good coach, and Purdue might be good in November, but I don't think Purdue's going to be good in September. And of course, USC goes to West Lafayette in a few weeks. So that is a game worth paying attention to, definitely for USC fans. 5 years ago, we wouldn't have cared one bit about a Purdue Ball State game. But now that we're in the Big Ten, yeah, we actually kind of need to keep one eye on that one, see what happens. All right, final game. This is an interesting one. Northwestern at Tulane. Tulane favored by 5.5 with an over-under of 46.5. By the way, I'll ask you about your Northwestern pick. Just want to say, I'm hammering Indiana minus the 23.5. I think Mendoza is an actual upgrade at quarterback from Rourke last season, and I love Kurt Signetti. Indiana minus 23.5 might be my lock of all these plays on the board in Big Ten Week 1. So Indiana's my lock, and really Nebraska. If I could get 6.5 instead of 7 with Nebraska, I'd also view that as a lock. 7, a little bit less so. Or anyway, back to Northwestern Tulane. Tulane favored by 5.5. with the over-under of 46.5, Ethan.
This is a really fascinating game. I mean, with Jake Retzloff now the quarterback at Tulane, I think Tulane has a real chance to compete for a college football playoff berth this year, especially if Boise State stumbles in any way. I think that they have a real chance to lock up that fifth seed there with someone of Jake Retzloff's caliber at quarterback, obviously, and just the solid program that they've built around Jake Retzloff as well. So I think Tulane is the right pick to win. I'm really split on whether I think that they're going to cover, though. I think this could be, this could end up being a 3-point game just because, Northwestern is going to come out with something to prove. And it's not like, even though I think Tulane's going to be a college football playoff contender, it's not like they're even considered a top 25 team yet. So I just think, I think the over/under is at a good spot to where I could confidently pick the over, because I think each team will at least put up 20 points in this game. But moneyline, not as confident in. I think it could end up being a 3-point game. So if I had to pick one, I'd pick Northwestern to cover, but I would stay away from the money line. I'd focus instead on the over/under if you're looking to bet this game, and bet the over.
What this game comes down to for me is John Sumrall, the head coach of Tulane. He's really, really good. And Northwestern's had problems at quarterback and generally on offense the past few years. I don't think Northwestern can score enough to stay in this game. I feel really good about Tulane minus the 5.5. Less certain about the over/under, but I really do like Tulane at minus 5.5. Like, I think Tulane can win this game by a touchdown. I don't feel like that's a reach. I think that's more likely than not. So that's the kind of thing that you bet on. So, all right, you've heard our Big Ten picks. Getting into the spirit of things, in week 1, it's game week. So, a reminder, we're now on Tuesdays throughout the football season. Tuesdays at 7 p.m. in LA, 10 p.m. in the East. But the new item, and so our next show, Ethan and Matt, here at the Voice of College Football, it's not going to be next Tuesday. Our next show, Sunday, post-game spectacular. We're wrapping up USC versus Missouri State, Sunday, August 31st. We go into this game, lots of notes that Ethan and I are going to have for you. We're going to ask the right questions. We're going to, kick this thing around. We're going to, after 7.5 months of speculating, we actually get an actual film session. We get to look at an actual game and arrive at some conclusions based on, solid, observable evidence. This is happening. That's happening. This player looked good. That player looked bad. And we try and make sense of it all. So Sunday, August 31st, 5 p.m. in the West, 5 p.m. in Los Angeles, 8 p.m. in the East. So a little bit earlier. And that's going to be our regular slot throughout the season. Like, we're going to come on after the NFL late games and right before Sunday Night Football. So 5 p.m. in Los Angeles, 5 p.m. on Sunday, August 31st. That's our next show. And again, for that show, and really all our shows during football season, Ethan and I are willing to go 3 hours, but that, of course, depends on Super Chat contributions. But we're going to go long to give you more of the USC content you crave. And we just ask that you support the USC channel here at the Voice of College Football. And of course, you don't just have the ability to do that with Super Chats, but memberships. Look at our YouTube page for memberships. And also go to vocfb.com/shop. Get some merch. Get a USC cap with that VOCFB logo. Every purchase, a portion of that goes to Ethan and myself. Another portion obviously goes to Mark Rogers, because he's the founder of the Voice of College Football. So merch is how you can support us, in addition to the Super Chats, also the memberships, and of course on YouTube. Like, subscribe, share, get notification reminders. Just do all those things. Tell your friends. If you like Ethan and Matt, and I know many of you do, pass the word and tell people about the merch, and tell people about the Super Chats, and tell people about, hey, Ethan and Matt are willing to give you a 3-hour show. The Gilligan's Island 3-hour tour. if you want. If you want more of us, well, there's a way to get it, and that's by contributing to the USC channel here at the Voice of College Football. All right, folks, we made it. Game week, Saturday. Enjoy, whether it's at the Coliseum or on television, and we will see you on Sunday. For Ethan Inman, this is Matt Zemek. Thanks for listening. Fight on.